Get ready, folks, because today we're diving deep into the power of humor. We've got a whole bunch of sources lined up for this one. TEDx talks, business school lectures, even a stand-up routine, all looking at humor from different angles. And by the end of this, well, you'll not only be chuckling along with us, but you'll actually understand the science behind it, the strategies, the surprising ways humor can totally transform your life.
It's interesting because most people think of humor as just like a quick laugh, a way to lighten the mood, right? But it really goes so much deeper than that. It's a powerful tool for real, with real psychological and physiological effects.
I completely agree. And speaking of powerful effects, Jennifer Aker from Stanford kicks things off with this concept she calls the Disney paradox. Think about it, those classic family trips to Disneyland. Long lines, meltdowns, maybe even heat stroke. I've definitely been there.
Oh, totally. But somehow, we always seem to remember the fun parts, right? Aker even tells this story about her son mentioning the tough moments in their holiday card, but ending with, "We can't wait to go back." It's like our brains are wired to highlight the positive. And laughter, well, laughter just supercharges that effect.
So it's not just about surviving the theme park experience, but actually thriving because of the laughter.
Exactly. Aker's research shows humor helps us process, even overcome negative experiences. But it goes even further. Studies show humor actually boosts creativity. It improves health, strengthens relationships. It's not just anecdotal, there's actual science to back it up.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Aker talks about the study where people had to solve a classic problem, attaching a candle to a wall using only a box of tacks and matches. Sounds impossible, right?
It is, unless you think outside the box, literally. The solution is to use the box itself. But the really fascinating part, those who watched a funny video beforehand were way more likely to find that creative solution. Humor helps us think more flexibly.
So humor is like mental WD-40. It loosens things up so those aha moments can happen.
I love that analogy. It's spot on. When we laugh, we're more open to making new connections, seeing new possibilities. And this isn't about being a stand-up comedian. It's about finding those little ways to bring more humor into our daily lives, no matter what we're facing.
I like that. It's not all in our heads either. Aker mentions another study where people watched either a stressful clip from Saving Private Ryan or a funny one from Kingpin. The results were pretty wild.
Oh, yeah. We found that watching the stressful clip actually caused a 35% decrease in blood flow. But the funny clip, a 22% increase.
Wow. So that's good news for our hearts, right?
Absolutely. And, stress is linked to so many health problems, so humor really does become this potent antidote.
Laughter is literally good for the heart, not just figuratively. That's awesome. And speaking of hearts, there was that study about couples reminiscing. The ones who remembered laughing together said they felt more satisfied in their relationship than those who just recalled positive memories in general.
It's true. Laughing together really does strengthen those bonds, doesn't it?
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about leadership. Paul Osincup, in his TEDx talk, makes a hilarious case for humor in the workplace. He tells this fantastically awkward story about accidentally walking into the women's restroom at a conference.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. He even mentioned a news story that day about someone getting arrested for doing the exact same thing.
Talk about bad timing, right? But the thing that I find really interesting is how Osincup owned the situation. He told his colleagues. They all laughed about it. And it actually strengthened their bond. It's kind of counterintuitive, don't you think?
It is, because you would think that, trying to hide that awkwardness would be the natural instinct.
Right. But by embracing it with humor, it did the opposite. It disarmed people, made him more relatable, and that goes to the core of his point. Leaders who can laugh at themselves, they're more approachable, they foster trust, and they create a more positive work environment overall.
So it's not just about cracking jokes, it's about that vulnerability, showing your human flaws and all. Exactly.
Yeah.
That authenticity makes people feel more comfortable, and they're more likely to follow someone they connect with on that human level.
I like that. Now, Osincup also gets into the science of laughter. He says it increases blood flow, reduces muscle tension, even get this, massages internal organs.
I don't know about the internal massage part, but I'm certainly intrigued. The thing I find really valuable, though, is that even fake laughter provides similar benefits. So we don't have to wait for a genuine chuckle. We can just let it out.
Wait, really? Like if I'm stressed, I can just start fake laughing and I'll actually feel better. I got to try that.
You might feel silly at first, but the physiological effects are real. It tricks your body into relaxing.
Wow. So humor isn't just a mental game, it's physical too. Fascinating.
Okay, moving from science to strategy. Harriet Beveridge, in her TEDx talk, offers this really unique perspective. She's both a comedian and a coach. So she uses actual jokes to show how comedic techniques can be applied in everyday life.
It's a brilliant approach, isn't it? It's not just about being funny on stage, but using humor to navigate the world around us. Exactly, and her first strategy is to challenge your assumptions. She uses this joke about her kids, saying, I have two kids, 11 and 13, rubbish names. You naturally assume she's talking about their ages, right?
Oh, totally. But the punchline is that she's talking about their names. It highlights how we make assumptions all the time, and those assumptions can really limit our thinking. Humor helps us question those assumptions and see things from a fresh perspective.
So it's like a mental reset button helping us break out of those ruts.
Precisely. It helps us approach problems with a more open mind, which often leads to new and creative solutions.
Love that. Okay, her second strategy is to embrace the inevitability of failure. She talks about dying on her backside during a gig, highlighting that even professional comedians bomb sometimes.
Oh yeah, she even wore this special t-shirt to address a heckle, but it totally backfired because the audience didn't get the joke. It just goes to show that perfection is a myth, and we're all going to mess up sometimes. It's about how we handle it, right?
So it's not about avoiding failure, but about how we handle it. Humor makes it less scary, maybe.
Exactly. If we can learn to laugh at our mistakes, it takes away their power. We're more likely to take risks and pursue our goals if we're not paralyzed by that fear of messing up.
I see, I see. All right, her third strategy is to work the room. She tells the story about a knock-knock joke that went hilariously wrong at a festival. The kid who was supposed to deliver the punchline, he just said, Jeff, instead.
Oh no. But she's a pro, so she just rolled with it and made it funny. The point is that even when things go totally off script, you can recover with humor. It's also about having that support system. We perform better when we're surrounded by people who believe in us and who can laugh with us, even through the mishaps.
So finding your hype squad is key. They help you get back on track when things go sideways, and they make the journey more fun.
Absolutely. Having that positive energy around you is essential, both for taking risks and for bouncing back when things don't go as planned.
All right, speaking of performing at our best, let's talk about presentations. We found this Stanford Business School lecture on the power of humor and public speaking, and they had some really great insights. They start with a story about a jester who saves his own life with a witty remark.
Oh, right. The king was furious and ready to execute him, but the jester, quick on his feet, says he'd rather die of old age. Completely disarmed the king. I mean, how could you not laugh at that? And the king spared him.
That's such a great example of how humor can diffuse even the most tense situations. You're basically using laughter as a shield.
Exactly. It's not about avoiding the serious issue, but about addressing it in a way that makes people more receptive. Humor builds rapport and allows you to deliver tough messages in a disarming way.
I like that. They also bring up Barack Obama and his self-deprecating jokes at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It really humanized him, right?
Absolutely. Those moments of self-mockery took him off that pedestal and made him so relatable. It's a reminder that leaders don't have to be perfectly polished. Showing vulnerability and humor can make you more authentic and approachable.
It makes you think, you know? Those carefully crafted speeches are one thing. But the moments where leaders let their guard down and have a laugh with everyone, those are the moments that really connect. They also talk about The Daily Show and how Jon Stewart used humor to highlight serious political issues. I guess humor makes those topics less intimidating, more engaging.
It's a brilliant strategy, isn't it? Think about it. We're way more likely to remember a point if it made us laugh. Humor can be a powerful tool for education and social commentary.
It's like slipping important information into a Trojan horse of laughter. Okay, so we've talked about the science of laughter, humor as a leadership tool, strategies for public speaking. Now let's get an introvert's perspective. Stand-up comedian Paul Snider. He has this hilarious bit about being an introvert in a world that often celebrates extroverts.
What stood out to you about his routine?
Well, his observation that introverts miss COVID is so relatable. And it's funny because it's true. For a lot of introverts, that forced isolation of the pandemic was kind of a relief.
He's tapping into a shared experience and finding the humor in it. It's a good reminder that different personality types experience the world in different ways. And what's funny to one person might not be funny to another.
Absolutely. He also tells the story about how avoiding confrontation actually led to his 25-year marriage. He was dating a girl in college and wanted to break up with her. But when he told her, she simply said, "Nah, I don't think so." And he hates confrontation, so he just went along with it, and they ended up getting married.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. He calls it a cry for help, jokingly.
Yeah.
But it also highlights how humor can be found in the most unexpected places. even in our own relationship mishaps. Sometimes the funniest things are the things we least expect.
So true. Speaking of mishaps, he also talks about how he's not smart enough to do crime, recounting a story about how he stole a package of Werther's Originals instead of a candy bar when dared by friends as a kid.
It's self-deprecating humor at its finest. He's finding the humor in his own perceived shortcomings, which makes him incredibly relatable. It's a good reminder that we don't have to be perfect or have it all figured out to be funny.
It's like he's saying, hey, I'm a mess and that's okay. In fact, it's pretty funny. That vulnerability is what makes it work. Now, speaking of vulnerability, let's talk about how humor can help us cope with challenges. Megan Corliss, in her TEDx talk, she shares how she uses humor to deal with mental health issues.
She's incredibly open about her struggles with depression and anxiety, even sharing an anecdote about almost dropping out of college to join a cult.
I know, right?
Wow.
She only watched like 2 hours of videos about this cult and was ready to ditch her dream school. Thankfully, she realized how ridiculous that was. But the way she tells the story, it's both heartbreaking and hilarious at the same time.
It's a great example of how humor can be a coping mechanism, a way to process difficult emotions and experiences. It doesn't diminish the seriousness of mental health challenges, but it allows her to approach them with a sense of lightness and perspective.
It's like she's saying, this is tough, but I'm going to find a way to laugh about it, even if it's just to keep myself from crying.
Exactly. Humor doesn't erase the pain, but it gives us a way to manage it, to find those moments of light in the darkness.
I love that. She even explains this technique she calls reframing, where you take a negative thought, put it on trial, evaluate the evidence, and then reframe it in a humorous way.
It's a powerful tool for taking those negative thoughts that can easily spiral out of control and turning them into something we can manage.
She jokes that she should have let the audience do the wave while explaining this because all the depressed people in the audience would zoned out. It's such a great example of how she uses self-deprecating humor to address a sensitive subject in a way that's both disarming and insightful.
It's also a way to create a sense of community and shared experience. By acknowledging the challenges of mental health, she's letting others know that they're not alone.
All right, are you ready to learn how to be funnier?
I am all ears.
Yeah.
I could definitely use some pointers.
Well, Andrew Tarvin, in his TEDx talk, argues that humor is a skill, not some innate talent you're born with. It can be learned and honed with practice.
That's a really empowering message, isn't it? It means that anyone, regardless of their natural comedic ability, can use humor more effectively.
I agree. He shares these hilarious anecdotes about his grandmother's text messages. She's 78 years old and just started texting, so she's still figuring things out. For example, she thought WTF stood for, wow, that's fun.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's a reminder that humor can be found in unexpected places, even in the miscommunications of our loved ones. And it just shows how technology is changing the way we communicate and experience humor.
Tarvin also uses his engineering background to illustrate how humor can make complex ideas more accessible and relatable. He compares human behavior to computer error messages.
That's such a brilliant analogy. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by emotions, imagine if we just got helpful error messages.
Exactly, like warning, system overload, please restart by taking a nap.
Or error, unable to establish connection to server. Please check your Wi-Fi and try again later.
So good. So we can learn from the pros, right? What can we learn from stand-up comedians specifically?
Well, stand-up comedy teaches us the importance of sharing our unique point of view. Each comedian has a different perspective on the world, and that's what makes them funny. It's about finding what's funny about your own experiences and sharing that with others.
So it's not about trying to be someone you're not, but about embracing your own quirks and perspectives.
Exactly. It's about finding your own voice and using humor to express it.
What about improv? What can we learn from that world?
Improv is all about embracing the yes and mindset. It's about accepting what's given to you and building upon it. It's about being open to possibilities and going with the flow, even if it takes you in unexpected directions.
So it's not about having a rigid plan, but about being flexible and adaptable?
Absolutely. It's about being present in the moment and responding creatively to whatever comes your way.
Okay, last question. What about sketch comedy? What lessons can we take from that?
Sketch comedy teaches us the importance of commitment to a performance. Think about those characters on Saturday Night Live or Key and Peele. They're so funny because the actors are completely invested in their roles.
They're not afraid to be silly, to push boundaries, to fully embody the characters they're portraying. And that confidence is contagious.
You know, it's like dating people are drawn to confidence. Tarvin tells this funny story about trying to use math pickup lines on a girl at a bar. Oh no, how did that go?
Not well. But his point is that the more we practice using humor, the more confident we become. The key is to push ourselves outside of our comfort zones and find what works for us.
It's about experimentation and finding your own comedic style. Not every joke will land, but that's okay. The important thing is to keep trying.
What about those of us who don't feel naturally funny? What if we're terrified of telling a joke that falls flat?
Tarvin offers a great suggestion. Be a shepherd of humor. Share funny things that you find. You can pass along a funny quote, share a TED Talk that you enjoyed, or even just include a humorous image in your presentation.
So you don't have to be the one creating the humor. You can simply be a curator, sharing the laughter that you find with others.
Exactly. It's a great way to start incorporating humor into your life without feeling the pressure to be the funniest person in the room.
I like that. Tarvin even argues that simply smiling can be a form of humor.
It sounds so simple, but it's true. Smiling is contagious, it creates a positive connection, and it can really lighten the mood.
It's like a little spark of joy that you can share with others.
And if all else fails, remember what Tarvin says. No one has ever been fired for telling a bad joke.
Unless it's inappropriate, of course. But a harmless joke that doesn't land, it's not the end of the world. In fact, it can be an opportunity to learn and grow.
And remember, humor isn't about replacing work. It's about making work more enjoyable and productive.
Tarvin uses the analogy of salt. You wouldn't eat an entire meal of salt, but a little bit enhances the flavor.
Humor is the seasoning that makes life more palatable.
I love that. Tarvin even goes so far as to say that you can't control how you think. So even if you work in an environment that doesn't really embrace humor, you can still find ways to cultivate it in your own life. You can listen to comedy podcasts, watch funny movies, or simply make an effort to notice the humor in everyday situations.
It's about choosing to see the world through a lens of humor, even when things are tough.
And finally, remember Tarvin's grandmother, the unexpected comedic genius who thought WTF meant, wow, that's fun.
She's a great reminder that humor can come from the most unlikely sources, and that we can all find ways to laugh more, regardless of our age, our experience, or our personality type.
So there you have it. We've covered a lot of ground here. What are some key takeaways that you think our listeners should remember from this first part of our deep dive?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember that humor is more than just a good laugh. It has real psychological and physiological benefits that can improve our lives in countless ways.
We've seen how it can boost creativity, reduce stress, improve our health, strengthen relationships, and even make us more effective leaders.
Second, humor is a skill that can be learned and developed. We can all become funnier by practicing, experimenting, and finding what works for us.
We don't have to be natural comedians to benefit from the power of humor. We can all find our own unique comedic voice.
And finally, humor can be found everywhere if we're open to seeing it. Don't be afraid to look for the funny side of things, even in challenging or unexpected situations.
Embrace the absurdities of life, laugh at your mistakes, and find joy in the unexpected.
And with that, we'll wrap up part 1 of our deep dive into the power of humor. Join us for part 2, where we'll explore even more fascinating aspects of this topic. Welcome back to our deep dive into the power of humor.
We've already unpacked so much the science behind laughter, humor's role in leadership, even strategies from stand-up comedians.
It's been a wild ride. But now let's get even more practical, shall we? How can people actually use humor in their everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, you mentioned a Stanford Business School lecture that had some really great tips on using humor in presentations. Maybe we could start there.
Absolutely. They actually emphasize the importance of starting strong. Like, a well-placed joke or humorous anecdote right at the beginning can really grab the audience's attention. Sets a positive tone for the whole thing, kind of like breaking the ice, making people feel at ease.
It creates a connection right from the get-go. I like that.
Yeah, it's much more engaging than just saying good morning and diving straight into your slides. They gave this example a presentation that opened with the line, "Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here." Or am I?
It's simple, but it's so effective. It injects humor and self-awareness right away. Lets the audience know you're not going to be all stiff and formal.
Exactly. And they also talked about using humor to emphasize key points.
Makes sense. Like a well-timed joke can make a complex idea more memorable, or maybe drive home a serious message in a way that really resonates with people.
Totally. They shared this story about a speaker who was giving a presentation on teamwork. At one point, he held up a single chopstick and said, "This is what happens when we try to do things alone." Then he held up a whole bundle of chopsticks and said, This is what happens when we work together.
Such a simple visual, but so powerful. It illustrates the point perfectly, and it's funny. I'll have to remember that one.
Right. The lecture also stressed the importance of authenticity, though. Like, the best humor always comes from a genuine place. You shouldn't try to force jokes that don't feel natural.
Or try to be someone you're not. Yeah, it'll show if you're not genuinely amused.
Exactly. Find what makes you laugh and share that. And don't be afraid to be self-deprecating either. A little bit of self-mockery can go a long way in making you more relatable and human.
Shows you don't take yourself too seriously, right? Which I think makes people feel more comfortable and more open to your message.
For sure. Okay, let's move beyond presentations for a second. Humor can be super useful in everyday conversations too.
Oh, absolutely. It can diffuse tension, strengthen relationships. It can even make those awkward moments a little less painful.
Think about it. How many times have you been in a situation where things are getting a little heated and then a well-timed joke just, like, lightened the mood?
Oh, all the time. Or maybe you were feeling nervous or awkward in a social setting, and a bit of humor helped you relax and connect with others. It's almost like humor can be a social lubricant, helping us navigate all those tricky interpersonal moments.
Right, and it's not always about cracking jokes either. Sometimes just observing the humor in a situation can help shift your perspective, makes things feel less stressful.
I like that. Like, let's say you're stuck in traffic, right? Instead of getting all frustrated, you could try to find the humor in it. Maybe imagine the other drivers as characters in a sitcom. Or come up with a funny song about the joys of rush hour.
Haha, exactly. The point is to find a way to reframe the situation, something that makes you smile, even if it's just internally.
And remember, humor is subjective, right? What one person finds funny, another might not. It's one of those things that's so personal.
So true. What makes me laugh might make someone else cringe. It happens.
The key is to be mindful of your audience and adjust your humor accordingly. You have to, like, read the room, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely read the room. Don't force jokes that don't feel natural. And always, always be respectful of others. Humor should never be used to put anyone down or make them feel bad.
That's such an important point. We've talked a lot about the benefits of humor, but are there any downsides? Is it ever possible to have too much of a good thing?
That's a really good question. And, it's important to be aware that humor can be misused or even misinterpreted sometimes. For example, sarcasm, if it's not delivered carefully, it can easily come across as, like, mean-spirited or condescending.
And using humor inappropriately, like making light of a sensitive topic or telling offensive jokes, that can really damage relationships and create conflict. It's crucial to be mindful of the context and the people you're with.
Totally agree. When in doubt, it's always better to err on the side of caution. It's also worth noting that relying too heavily on humor as a coping mechanism can sometimes be a way of masking deeper emotional issues.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, if you're constantly using humor to deflect or avoid dealing with tough feelings, it might be helpful to explore those feelings with a therapist or a counselor.
Exactly. Humor is a powerful tool for getting through life's ups and downs, but it's important to use it in a healthy and balanced way.
So, as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listener?
Well, first and foremost, remember that humor is a skill. And just like any other skill, it takes practice. Don't be afraid to experiment. Try new things, find what works for you.
It's all about finding your own unique style, finding your voice.
Second, be mindful of your audience and the context. Humor should be used to connect, not to divide. Be respectful, be kind. Use humor in a way that uplifts and inspires.
And lastly, embrace the power of laughter. It's a gift, really, that can bring so much joy, connection, and resilience to our lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Get ready for part 3. Where we'll explore even more fascinating sides of humor and its impact on the world around us.
We'll be looking at how humor is used in different cultures, how it can be used to promote social change, and even how it's being explored in artificial intelligence. Stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into humor.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've covered everything from the science behind laughter to practical tips on using humor every day.
And let's not forget how humor can make us more creative, less stressed, and even better at connecting with others. But now I'm really curious about how humor works on a global scale. Like, what about humor in different cultures? Is there even such a thing as universal humor?
That's a really great question, and it's a bit complicated to answer. While there are definitely certain types of humor that seem to resonate across cultures like slapstick, physical comedy, that sort of thing, what's hilarious in one culture might be totally confusing or even offensive in another.
So no laughing at the same jokes worldwide then?
Not always. Humor is often so deeply tied to shared values and norms, specific cultural experiences.
Mhm.
For example, self-deprecating humor in some cultures, it's seen as humble, even endearing.
But in other cultures, it might be taken the wrong way, like a sign of weakness or insecurity. It really highlights how important context is.
Totally. And it's especially important to be mindful of those cultural differences when you're using humor in, say, a cross-cultural setting.
Hmm.
We don't want to accidentally offend anyone or create misunderstandings.
It makes you realize just how much we take for granted when it comes to humor. We kind of assume everyone laughs at the same things, but it's not that simple at all.
And even within the same culture, humor can vary a lot depending on things like age, gender, social background, even just personal experiences. It's so diverse.
It makes you wonder, with all this variation, is it even possible to teach AI systems about humor? Like, we humans can barely agree on what's funny half the time.
It's definitely a huge challenge. But that's part of what makes it so interesting. Researchers are trying to figure out how to program these machines to understand all the nuances, the subtle cues, the shared knowledge, even the emotional context behind a joke.
It sounds incredibly complex, but why even try? What's the point of having an AI that gets our jokes?
Well, one big reason is that it can make those interactions with AI feel much more natural and engaging. Imagine if you could chat with a virtual assistant that understood your sarcasm or responded with a witty comeback. It wouldn't feel so robotic, so impersonal.
That would be incredible. And I can see how it could be super helpful in fields like customer service or even education. Imagine an AI tutor that could make learning fun and engaging through humor.
Exactly. Plus, it could potentially lead to AI systems that are more creative and innovative. Humor often forces you to think outside the box and find unexpected solutions, and those are valuable skills in any field.
So, teaching AI about humor isn't just about making them funnier, it's about making them smarter and more adaptable overall.
Precisely. It's about helping them understand the complexities of human communication and pushing the boundaries of what they can do. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about humor and social change. Throughout history, we've seen comedians and satirists use humor to challenge the status quo and shine a light on injustice.
Think about some of the greats like George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Lenny Bruce. They used their platforms to tackle really sensitive subjects, things like race, religion, and politics. They pushed boundaries and made people think differently.
They weren't afraid to make people a little uncomfortable, to use humor as a weapon against hypocrisy and ignorance. And today, we have comedians like Trevor Noah, Samantha Bee, John Oliver carrying on that tradition. They use humor to tackle current events, social issues, getting people talking and thinking critically.
It's amazing how humor can be such a powerful force for change. It can make tough topics easier to discuss, break down barriers, even foster empathy and understanding. And it can be a way to call out injustice and hold people accountable.
Absolutely. It's like sneaking in those important messages under the cover of laughter. A Trojan horse of social commentary, so to speak.
I love that analogy, but of course, using humor for social change can be tricky. It's so important to be sensitive, respectful, even when addressing really difficult topics.
Couldn't agree more. And it's crucial to avoid punching down, meaning making jokes at the expense of people who are already marginalized or vulnerable. Humor should be used to uplift, to empower, never to hurt or belittle anyone.
So well said. Humor is a double-edged sword in a way. It can be incredibly powerful for good, but it needs to be used responsibly.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up this incredible deep dive into humor, what are some final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that humor is a truly transformative force. It can bring us joy, connect us to others, help us through tough times, and even inspire us to make the world a better place.
It's been amazing exploring all the different ways it shows up in our lives, from boosting our creativity to improving our health, making us better leaders, and even smoothing out those awkward conversations. It's truly a gift.
It really is. So, to everyone listening, embrace the power of laughter. Look for those moments of humor, even in unexpected places. Don't be afraid to share your own unique brand of funny with the world. And remember, even if you don't feel like a natural comedian, you can still be a shepherd of humor, passing along the joy and laughter you find.
Beautifully said. And with that, we'll bring our deep dive into humor to a close. We hope you've enjoyed the journey, learned a thing or two, and most importantly, had a good laugh along the way.